Well, hello, and I am excited to share with you my new book. It is, I know I still keep tempting you with my book, but it still needs to undergo some changes in it, just minor changes. This is a proof copy that I have here. It's not intended to be the final copy. I just printed it out, and I'm going out of town next week, and I'm going to bring it with me and look at it and proof it, and think about maybe adding some things or whatever I need to do with it. Tempo and duration in the music of Bach. Uncovering J.S. Bach's science of tempo, symbolism, and proportion. A treatise by Corey Hall. This book took me over 30 years to write. It's really, I've been working on this my whole working life, really, I can say that. So basically what it is, in a nutshell, is I stumbled across some very intriguing findings in Bach's music when I was in graduate school way back in the 90s. And I first thought it was coincidental, but then I explored more and found it happened all the time, or it happened, every time I analyzed works, it was happening more frequently. These things, I'll tell you what they are. You maybe don't know what they are yet, but these things were happening more frequently. And then, so it turned into a whole scientific study of Bach's works, in which I really felt obligated to analyze Bach's complete works, basically. And the way I analyze them is I count the number of measures, and I map out Bach's plan, his architectural plan of his works. Now, you know me as a pianist. Of course, I'm a pianist, I'm a keyboard player, but this book is not about the piano. It has nothing to do with piano. Actually, it does have Bach's keyboard works in here, but let me read the contents to you here about the author. Foreword, part one. So part one are relatively short chapters on, first I give you my background here in a prelude kind of chapter, and then chapter one is called Groundbreaking Discoveries. I talk about my discoveries way back in the 90s that I hadn't really published fully yet. And then chapter two, Bach's tradition versus modern tradition. This talks about the tempo traditions in Bach's time versus our time. And these are relatively short chapters, and they're easy to read. Chapter three is called Bach's musical science and the imitation of nature. Chapter four is called the Alpha and the Omega and large-scale symmetry. And chapter 5 is called Reconstruction of Bach's System of Tempo. Chapter 6 is called The Cantatas, Say It All. And chapter 7 is the conclusion. So part 1 consists roughly of, I'd say, about 50 pages of text explaining things. And then part two is probably, I'd say, 2/3 of the book. It's most of the book, actually. Part two is basically just analyses, and it's not explanations. There are a few explanations, but most of the explanations are here in part one, and then part two is more just sort of kind of dry analyses. So, and there's some really nice musical examples in here too that I've drafted up. Some nice tables, nice examples here of, here's some examples of Bach's use of symbolism. Here are some other Bach's use of symbolism that I discovered in the 90s that no one else has discovered. Bach's tradition versus modern tradition. I talk a little about how the tempo tradition changed. Bach's musical science, the imitation of nature. See, these are really short chapters, you see. the alpha and the omega, large-scale symmetry. Really nice diagrams in here too, like here and on these pages here. Some nice musical diagrams to illustrate points. And reconstruction of Bach's system of tempo. This explains, really, this is the nuts and bolts of the tempo theory here proposed in this book. This is the nuts and bolts of it right here. So this is a very important chapter for understanding how this system works. And it is a system that is based on architecture, sort of as a model. I talk about the way that Bach, musical architect and theologian, I talk about how architecture and music have some similarities, and that Bach used these things in his works. These are tables, these are statistics that I've compiled on all the cantatas here, on durations and things in the cantatas. Table 5 here, a very large table from the cantatas too. I have case studies here. I have 10 case studies for Bach's cantatas. And basically what these are they're just little analyses of the cantatas, of the way that Bach organized the durations and the tempos. And then I compare what Bach's ideal with actual recordings. So these case studies always have recordings, always from YouTube. So you can go and use speed control on YouTube to manipulate certain tempos. I love this chapter here. I think that it will explain a lot, the case studies chapter in the cantatas. And then after the conclusion, the conclusion here is I tell you what all Bach's tempos were because I figured that all out. So I tell you what Bach's tempos were, his dance styles. I have here lists of his dance tempos. And then here is part 2. So part 2 is the analyses of Bach's works. This is sort of some instructions on how to read these tables. But I think if you read part 1 carefully and you go through all the examples discussed in part 1, you will be very well versed at how to read these tables. So these tables to the untrained eye just look like a bunch of numbers, but really they say a lot. So each table here is a work. This is cantata number 1, cantata 2, cantata 3. So I've compiled analytical tables and tempo analyses of every single movement in every cantata. So you can look up any cantata and you can see how many measures Bach wrote for that movement, and you can see the way that Bach organized the durations according to the proposed theory in this book. And then these numbers here show these relationships. For example, in cantata number 7, we see here it begins with a 6-minute chorus. And then we see that number 4, a tenor aria, lasts 4 minutes. And so that's a 3-to-2 ratio. 6-to-4 is 3-to-2. And then we see that this bass aria number 2, this bass aria at its proper tempo, it lasts 4.5 minutes, 4 minutes and 30 seconds. And then this aria here, the alto aria, lasts 3 minutes, which is 2-to-3 to 4:30. So you see, this is very typical of what Bach did in his works. He did this all the time. He did this in every work. Really, this is really amazing, because this tells us exactly the way that Bach wanted his. He didn't really care about the way that we would perform it, 200 years later or something. That's not what the point is. The point is we're trying to get into Bach's thinking mind and figure out by detective work what he was intending. And that's really quite easy to do. It's really clear when you look at the number of measures. So these are the numbers of measures. You study those, and then these are the tempos. There's possibilities. There's maybe, for each movement, I would say maybe 3 possible tempos that you could choose from, but the goal is to locate that tempo that Bach probably thought was the natural tempo for that movement. Because in part 1, I explained how in Bach's time, natural tempo was really a thing. We don't think of it now. We don't, but in Bach's time, they had rules, and they had natural kinds of tempos for various works and various movements. So anyway, as you go through this, 207 cantatas I've analyzed here. This took me, my initial analyses took a few years, but my really final analyses took probably 3 months of nothing but listening to Bach cantatas and compiling all the statistics for these cantatas too. So in order to understand Bach's works and his other works, his non-cantata works, these are still the cantatas here, in order to understand his keyboard works or his instrumental works, getting to the end of the cantatas here. In order to understand that, you have to really study the cantatas, because the cantatas say everything. The cantatas give us all we need to know about Bach's system. And then once you know that, then you can apply that to, say, keyboard works and things like that. But you're not really going to understand how they apply to, say, preludes and fugues for organ or something. You're not really going to understand why that is unless you really delve into the cantatas and look at those and try to understand those. So anyways, basically what it is, these are all the preludes and fugues for organ. And every prelude and fugue Bach united with a certain duration ratio, whatever it may be. It's not really unpredictable what it is, but basically what you do is you assign a tempo for each movement for the prelude and fugue. You calculate how long it lasts at that tempo, and then you uncover relationships like 2 to 3 ratios or something like that. So so I summarize that with these bullet points here, and that's funny. This is a proof copy, and that's funny. I already saw a mistake. I'm gonna have to fix that. Here it is. Something wrong here. That's funny. First mistake. I listed, the mistake was it's listed here as 2-3, but here it's a 1-1, so that's easy to fix. Anyway, so this goes through the organ, preludes and fugues, and then all the organ music, pretty much most, if not all, of Bach's organ works are in here. The great 18 organ chorales in here. Inventions and sinfonias, the English suites. Here's the English-French suites here. Miscellaneous keyboard suites here. French overture and Italian concerto here. Well-tempered clavier, book 1. This is all well-tempered clavier here. So remember, Bach had a plan for every work. He unified every work with some kind of a duration ratio, which you'll learn more about later when I do videos when the book is totally finished. But anyway, Goldberg variations here. I still need to go over that chapter. It's kind of old. I need to revise that chapter. Works for lute right here and guitar. and sonatas and partitas for violin right here. 6 cello suites here. Sonatas for violin and harpsichord, sonatas for viola da gamba and harpsichord, partita and sonatas for flute, Brandenburg concertos, harpsichord concertos, 4 orchestral suites. That's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4. And then last but not least, the Art of Fugue. This is one of my favorite chapters of all, the Art of Fugue. I love this chapter. This really took a lot of detective work because I had to compare what Bach wrote in his earlier versions and compare that with what he did in his final version. And I sort of pieced together, I sort of reason out the tempo and the durations of them, and I explain that based on the way that Bach, based on his early and later versions. So this is a fascinating chapter here, the Art of Fugue. I've studied the Art of Fugue for a very long time, for like about 30 years. When I say study, I mean study the Bach's work, not play it. I mean, I can't play the whole thing, but I've studied it theoretically for like 30 years. So I'm very, very close to this work, and I give my analysis here on the Art of Fugue. And then here's the final table, the final version of the Art of Fugue for all of the durations here. And that's the end. The Art of Fugue finishes it. And there is no bibliography or anything, because I have some footnotes and things, or I have some endnotes in part 1, and I list the books there that I cite from. But I hope that you will be interested in this book when it's finished. Like I said, this is not final. This is my proof copy, so I'm really going over this, and I'm going to, not a whole lot needs to be changed. I just need to prove things. I might change some fonts or make some fonts bigger or something like that. So look forward to this being officially published in July. I'm not sure about the date yet. Sometime in July it will be officially published. And I will really look forward to that, because this has taken me all of my working life. And it's really, really a big load off my back right now, because this took a lot of work. This is all my blood, sweat, and tears right here in this book from over 30 years ago that I began. And now it's becoming finalized. So I really look forward to that. Thank you for joining me in this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.